Hey everybody, Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development, and this is part of our Veteran Stories Difference Makers series, and I'm delighted to have Army veteran Scott DeLuzio with us. Hi, Scott.
Hey, how are you? Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to come on and share my story.
Oh, it's our absolute honor and pleasure. And firstly, thank you very much for your service.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'd love for you to share with us what was your motivation for joining the military, the Army, in the first place.
Yeah. So growing up, my family, we were very patriotic. The way we were brought up, we had the military, the first responders, and people like that held in very high regard. When other kids were growing up, they were looking up to the sports figures of Michael Jordan and things like that, right? And for us, we looked up and respected the military and the police and uh, the firefighters and people like that. So
Right.
so we were very much was ingrained in us. My grandfather, he served in the Navy during World War II. My parents did not serve in the military, but they missed the Vietnam draft by like a year or two, in that. So they were just a little bit on the young side for the Vietnam, um, but they always taught us. About the dangers that existed in the world, and made sure that we respected and appreciated the people who were willing to stand up and defend us, even though they didn't even know us from anybody else. They were still willing to defend us, one way or another. So when 9/11 happened, I was in college, and I had considered just dropping out of college right then and there and joining the military. I decided to sleep on that for a little bit, make sure I was not rushing into a rash decision, and I realized that if I was to drop out of college, I probably wouldn't finish what I started, and so I was already a couple of years in. I figured whatever military response is going to take place is going to probably take place over several years, and it'll still be waiting for me when I get out of college. So I decided to stay in and finish that. Um, right around the time that I was graduating college, my younger brother, Stephen, he started going to school, and to college, and he met a guy who was in the army, and he um, learned a little bit about it, and found that he could go to school and be in the army in what's called the Army National Guard, which is sort of
Hmm.
part-time soldiers. 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year is the training commitment, and then obviously they could be deployed as well. But for the most part, it kind of part-time soldiers. So he learned a little bit about that, and found that it sounded interesting to him. It was something that he was uh, curious about. He wanted to get involved with, and so he joined the army. And so overnight, my younger brother went from being the younger brother, right, and to all of a sudden this guy that I was looking up to and respecting, and I was damn proud of, for him
Wow.
making this decision, right. Um, and um, and then about a year after that, I heard this report in the news that was saying that the military was struggling to meet their recruiting numbers, that they weren't having enough manpower to fill the ranks, and that really angered me. And I was thinking to myself, where are all these people who, after 9/11, were ready to move mountains to go and
Hmm.
get payback for what had taken place? And then I had a good long minute of self-reflection, and I said, well, I am one of those people, and I still haven't done anything. Um, and and of course, if my younger brother is able to do this, then there's no way I'm going to let him go and get all the glory, and not take part in that as well. So I said, well, yeah, I have nothing but poor excuses right now for why I'm not doing my part and why I'm not joining the military. So I decided right then and there that I was going to enlist in the military. I decided to do the same kind of thing that my brother did, go into the National Guard, which was again 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year. I already had a professional job out of college, and so it worked out nicely for me. I was able to continue my professional career and also serve my community and my country
Hmm.
by joining that way. So that was kind of the background of how I got started in the military, and why I wanted to serve. It was really just part of our upbringing. We were very patriotic. We always had this respect for the people who are willing to serve, and I wanted to give back to our country.
Just before we explore some of the things that you did when you were in the military, um, do you think that the feeling, the appreciation for the women and men that serve, generally speaking, do you think the appreciation, the honor, the respect, the thankfulness has changed as a general attitude?
I think it has, for the most part, for the better. Of course, there's always going to be some people who have these anti-military sentiments that they have, in them. But um, when you look back to the Vietnam era, where the soldiers were coming back from overseas, they're being called baby killers, and they're getting spit on, and they were
Mm,
being beat up and things like that, just because they served their country. And in many cases, they didn't have a choice. They were drafted to serve their country, and they were being treated like almost like less than human. And that was just a very unfortunate time in our history. Um, but now you see so much being done for the military and for the veterans, and just generally speaking, I think people, whether they agree with the wars that we fight in or not, they still respect the people who are volunteering, in this case, because there is no draft at this point. The people who are volunteering to go and serve the country and do whatever it is that the country is asking them to do. The
right,
selflessness, I think, is very, very much respected.
right, great. Well, share with us some of your experiences, and I know you have some things to tell about your time in the military.
Yeah, so for the most part, the training that we did in the military. So I was an infantryman, so kind of the ground fighters, the ground forces. We did a lot of training, where we practice clearing buildings and kind of fighting through the woods and different like navigation techniques and all that kind of stuff. And we did a lot of that kind of training. um, and being in the National Guard here, we also serve our individual states, as well as the broader country. So whenever there was a natural disaster, a flood, a hurricane, things like that, uh, the National Guard very often would get called up to go and provide assistance with evacuating people from certain areas and things like that. So that was an interesting part of the job as well. You kind of had to keep an eye on the weather to see what was going on during certain times of year, and you didn't want to make too many personal plans when the weather was looking like it may not be cooperating, because you might be getting called up all of a sudden. So that was an interesting part of it as well. Um, Fast forward a few years, I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2010, and at that time, so I mentioned earlier, my younger brother was in the National Guard as well,
Mm,
and so he and we were part of two separate state National Guards. So he was in the Vermont Army National Guard, and I was in the Connecticut Army National Guard. But both of uh, those National Guard units were part of the same brigade. And so this deployment was a brigade wide deployment. So he and I both were deployed to Afghanistan at the same time. Um, and that was difficult, because especially for our family, because
mm,
they had never had both of us deployed at the same time. And it was it's nerve-wracking to have any family member deployed.
yes.
My brother had previously deployed to Iraq, and that was pretty nerve-wracking. Apparently it was a very difficult deployment that he was on. But having both of us overseas at the same time, I was a new father with my first son was born just a couple months before we
Wow.
were deployed, and newly married. I was married for about a year and a half at that point, and so it was just a lot of lot of moving pieces and a lot of things that were kind of difficult for the whole family that we were leaving behind at home. And so we were both deployed there. When we were in Afghanistan, we did not have the opportunity to see each other. We were in the same part of the country, eastern Afghanistan, but far enough away that we never got a chance to see each other. So um, really, the only communication I had with him was just uh, kind of playing the telephone game where I would call home and I'd talk to my parents and tell them what I was up to, and he would do the same, and then my parents would communicate to us like what we were up to. So that's
Right.
really the only way I had any kind of communication with him. So that was a little hard too. Um, in Afghanistan, the job that we had was really border security for the most part. Our unit was stationed about 2 miles from the Pakistani border, and there was a border crossing where the majority of the coalition forces where our supplies would come through. Because Afghanistan being a landlocked country, most of the supplies
Mm,
were brought over on cargo ships, and they would dock in Pakistan, be put on a truck, and then drive through to Afghanistan. So we had to provide some security to make sure that those trucks had safe passage to get into the country, and
right.
also keep kind of tally of how many trucks actually made it through, because they wouldn't always make it through from the
Right.
port where they came off and stuff. So that was kind of our job, was to kind of secure the area and also do a quick sanity check on the inventory that was coming through. So we kind of had an idea of what to expect as it was coming through. Um, and and for the most part, it was a uneventful job that we had. There wasn't too much in terms of dangerous situations that we encountered there at the border. Um, it was relatively peaceful. There was a few kind of hairy situations, but it wasn't too bad. Um, Later on in our deployment, we got sent on missions where we actually had to fly out on helicopters further out from our base to these very remote villages where we had this suspected Taliban activity, and we would find we would be working with the Afghan army and kind of training them and having them go through the villages and kind of take the lead on some of
Mm,
these searches that we would be doing. So that was interesting too, because you're working with a partner force. You don't speak the same language, but you're trying to achieve the same goal,
mm,
and it was difficult to work with them, especially
mm.
during the time of year that it was. It was during the Muslim holiday of Ramadan, where they
Right.
they typically don't eat or drink anything during the daylight hours, and that's typically when we would do most of our training and our missions was during the daylight hours, because they didn't have night vision capabilities. So it made it really difficult, because after a couple of hours they were pretty much just wiped of all their energy, and didn't really want to do too much more. So it was a very difficult thing for us to do. And Yeah, so that was kind of the majority of our deployment in the types of things that we were doing, throughout that deployment.
Mm. And so during that time, when you finished up your tour there, were you stationed back in the States?
Yeah, so my deployment over there actually came to sort of an abrupt end. I was on one of these missions that I was just talking about, and um, I had gotten a call on the radio that our commanding officer was looking for me. And anyone who knows anything about the chain of command knows that the commanding officer usually doesn't go directly to an enlisted soldier like that. He'll usually send a message through the chain of command to get to me.
Mm,
But that wasn't the case here. He was looking specifically for me. And usually when that kind of thing happens, something either really good happened or really bad. And I couldn't think of anything really good that had taken place. So I started scratching my head thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I screw up? What went wrong? So um, I finally connected with the commanding officer, and he told me to come over to this area off to the side away from everyone else, and told me to take a knee, and told me that my brother's unit had been ambushed, and that my brother had gotten hit. Now, prior to this moment, it had I don't know if it's a defensive mechanism in my own head. I had never considered the possibility that my brother could be injured or killed on this deployment. Like, none of that ever crossed my mind. Um, and I think partially, if I had thought that, I wouldn't be able to do my own job because I'd be worried about him just being the
Mm,
bigger brother, right? So my head just went straight to, okay, well, so what are the logistics? How do I get to him to kind of be there and comfort him? And if he needs blood or an organ or something like that, I'd probably be his best bet to do that, because I'm the closest relative to him. So let's get me to him so I can help him. But what I didn't understand was that not only was he hit in that ambush, but he was also killed in that
right.
firefight. Um, so that just brought my whole world crashing down on me, and
Mm,
it was just a incredibly traumatic event uh,
mm,
to have happen, especially being so far from home, so far from support network. Obviously, I had my
yeah.
soldiers there who cared for me like family, but it's different. It's not your parents, it's not your wife, it's not your close immediate family, right? Um, so so that was difficult. Um, but to make matters worse, just maybe 20 minutes after receiving this notification that my brother was killed, our own unit started taking fire from the village that we had just come out of. Obviously, the Afghan army didn't do as good of a job as they said they did in terms of searching the village for weapons and things like that,
Right.
because we started taking RPG fire and small arms fire from this village, and that just sent me into a complete fit of rage, and just the anger
Yeah.
billowing up inside of me. I was so angry at these people, and um, but I realized at that moment that that anger wasn't going to do any good. If anything, it probably was going to end up getting me injured or killed, and I couldn't do that to my parents. Have them getting a second knock on the door, or have my wife
Yeah.
become a widow, or my son grow up without a father, or whatever. So I was like, okay, I need to just put this aside. As angry as I am right now, I need to put it aside. And I also had 10 or so soldiers who were relying on me for leadership, and I didn't want anything to happen to them as well, because how could I tell their
Mm,
parents or their spouses uh, that they didn't make it home because I couldn't keep my head on straight, right? So I said, okay, I need to
mm,
focus on my job and get this done. After that firefight, we managed to squash that pretty easily. We had the high ground, so it was much easier for us. Plus, we had air support assets as well, so that made it a whole lot easier for us. But um, after that firefight, I was pretty much flown off of that battlefield, and that began my journey home. And within about 2 days, I was home in the states, and that's where I stayed. I did not return back to Afghanistan after that, um, and it began a very difficult process for me in terms of getting back into the swing of things, in terms of going back to my civilian job. Um, I found it
mm,
very difficult for me to relate to the civilians that I worked with, even though just a few
right.
months earlier I I used to uh, be just fine with them. I used to, we used to go out to get drinks at a happy hour, or just hang out after work, or even at lunch or whatever. We'd hang out, we'd talk, and everything. But I just found it very difficult to relate to them. I only lasted at that job for maybe about a month and a half, maybe 2 months after coming back home, um, because it was just so hard for me. I not only didn't I relate with the people that I worked with, but it was hard for me to find any kind of sense of purpose or meaning in the work that I was doing. Uh, it
Mm,
was it was really hard for me to just even get out of bed in the morning, to take a shower, put on my clothes, and go to work. It was like I just didn't care anymore about about that work or anything that I was doing. It was um, a lot of unresolved issues. Going all the way back to the day that my brother died. That anger that I had built up inside of me, I still carried that anger, and I
Mm.
didn't really know what to do with it. And I would get angry at the smallest of things, small things like someone got pickles on their sandwich at lunch, and they asked for no pickles, and they would be complaining about it, and I'd flip out on them uh, like who cares, like that's such an insignificant thing, just take them off. If that's
Yeah.
like such a big deal to you, just take it off. And but I would be so mad at these little tiny things. Even my son, he was only about a year old at the time, um, and he would do things that little kids do, right? He'd spill his food, he'd make a mess, he'd whatever. And I would just be just so angry at these little things. And I
Mm.
started to realize, like, that's not who I am. That's not the type of person I was before I left. And that's not the type of father I want to be. That's not the type of husband or son or any. That's just not the type of person I want to be. So I said, uh, something's got to give. Something is not right here, and I need to figure this out. Um, and so this was a little while after getting back, maybe 6 or so, maybe a little more months after getting back from Afghanistan, when I really realized that what I was doing just wasn't working. I wasn't sleeping at all. The only way I would get to sleep is uh, if I drank myself basically to the point of passing out, um,
Right.
and and that was really the only way I'd get to sleep, which didn't make for a great pleasant morning the next morning. So um, I try to wake myself up with a bunch of coffee or energy drinks, and that only worked for so long, and then eventually I had to drink that kind of stuff later and later in the day, which ended up impacting my sleep all over again, and it just became this
Mm.
vicious cycle. It was just terrible. So, not only was I carrying all this anger, I was always irritable too, because I never was sleeping right. I just everything was going in the wrong direction for me. So eventually, my wife and I sat down, and she said, I was hoping that you could kind of get through some of this stuff on your own, but it's probably time that you talk to somebody about this, and
Yeah.
that's eventually what I ended up having to do.
And has that process continued for you?
Yeah. So when I first started talking to someone here, it was through the Veterans Affairs,
Mhm.
and um, the guy that I talked to was incredibly helpful with getting my anger under control, and helping me get to the point where I could sleep at night.
Mm.
For most nights, and it was much better. Um, and about a year and a half, maybe a little more, after seeing this person, uh, I was my family and I were moving to another part of the country, and um, I said, I think I'm in a pretty good place. I probably don't need to continue with this treatment. I may not be perfect, but I think I can handle it from here. And so we moved. I changed uh, the process of going to these sessions. I wasn't going anymore, and and I was okay for a little while, but until I wasn't, and I started
Right.
slipping into some of those old habits where I wasn't sleeping, I was drinking too much, I was uh, having a short temper, I was getting angry and irritable at things, and I realized that uh, things like what I was going through, mental health specifically, is not like a quick one and done kind of thing all the time. It's not like if you break your arm and you go to the doctor and you get it put in a cast, and after a little while it's healed and it's done, and that's it. And
Mm.
unless you injure it again, you don't have to go back and get continued treatment for that type of injury. But our minds are a little bit different, and our minds need a uh, little follow up every once in a while, I think.
Mm.
And it's I sort of relate it to going to your annual physical checkup with a doctor for your physical health. You go to make sure that your heart's beating right, your lungs are working correctly, that all the little aches and pains that you might have that you're just kind of dealing with, that they're not something more serious. You go and just get those kind of things checked up. And with mental health type issues, I feel like it's okay to do that type of thing too, to go back every once in a while and just say, hey, I just kind of got a few things that I'm working through. I just want to kind of get through this, and not have it spiral into some bigger problem. And so I went back a little while ago, and I took a break after that, but I continue to go to treatment through the Veterans Affairs. And we tried different forms of treatment. There's everyone usually typically thinks of talk therapy being the you go into the office and you sit on the couch and you spill your guts out to the therapist and everything. And while there is some degree of truth to some of that type of stuff, there's other there are plenty of other treatment options as well that don't
Right.
necessarily involve that same type of treatment. But they're all geared towards getting you better, getting you over whatever it is that is holding you back. And in my case, I had PTSD from my experiences over there. I had some just unresolved issues, things that continued to flash back in my mind, even all these years later. This was 2010. It's now 2022 now, and 12 years later,
Mm.
these things are still popping up in my head. And it's like I felt like I should probably be over those things by now. I should, if I was able to handle this stuff on my own, it probably shouldn't be an issue. But obviously, they're still popping up, and so I'm probably not able to handle all this stuff on my own, at least not
Mm.
as well as I thought I was. So I do continue to get help, and I will continue to seek this kind of treatment, whether it's through the Veterans Affairs or through other organizations, because there are so many organizations out there who offer
Mm.
uh, different alternative forms of therapies to veterans. I'm open to all of them, and seeing which ones work the best. And I may try something and may not work for me. May work great for somebody else, but may not work for me. So no harm in trying it, but try it, and don't give up. Just move on if it's not the right thing. If it's not the right thing for me, right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I do still continue to get some treatment. The person I'm working with now is absolutely phenomenal. She's been helping me process through some of these they call them trauma thoughts, trauma
Mm.
memories that come up. And it's just these things that continuously pop up in my mind, whether I'm thinking about them actively or not. They just kind of pop up every once in a while, and
Yeah.
almost bring me back to, as if I'm standing there in Afghanistan, as if this event is happening all over again. So it's helping me to process through those so that they're not quite as intrusive as they have been for all these years.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that that's a really, gosh, what a challenging and difficult time for you and your family. I think that for whether someone's listening who's a veteran or they've been through trauma themselves, it's good for them to recognize from your example, from what you've shared, that, like you said, it's not a one and done. Those
Right.
sorts of deep emotional, mental, physical scarring situations, you can't just get over it in an instant. And one meeting with a therapist is not going to get it done. And so
Right.
these things become battles that we constantly fight. And they don't have to be battles where it's a win or lose. It's just a challenge we need to keep working through. I really
Correct.
appreciate you sharing that so people can be encouraged that there's nothing wrong with them when they keep having to deal with these pervasive issues that pop up. It's something that they're going to have to keep developing and working on strategies. And I love that you said there's not a one size fits all approach or therapy or
Right.
strategy that you can use. And it's okay to try different things, because what works for Scott won't work for Craig, and it might work differently for someone else. So be okay with not being okay, and be okay with trying lots of different strategies. Thank you for
That's
sharing
correct.
that. What a difficult time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like, you're absolutely right with that. Like there are so many different approaches, and I feel like some people just expect that first thing they try. We live in this on demand society where uh, we want the results right now, and
Yeah,
you order something on Amazon, and it's there the next morning, and
that's
we
right.
just want it now, kind of thing. And it's not always the case that it's going to work out that way. So be patient. Give yourself a little grace, because the things that have happened to you, you're not abnormal or crazy or anything like
Mm,
that. It's
yeah,
a perfectly natural response to a uh,
yes.
not so natural experience, right?
Mm.
A very traumatic, abnormal experience that you may have encountered. So you're human. Give yourself a little bit of grace.
What I'd love to do, Scott, is to bring up onto the screen the podcast and the book. And I just
Sure.
wondered if they a result of what you've been through? Obviously, can you talk us through that? Because I'd love for people to be able to know about them and access them.
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast I started about 3 years ago, and this podcast, the Drive On podcast, started really as a result of after coming back from Afghanistan, our the soldiers that we served with, we started losing some of them at home to suicide, and that to me just did not sit well. It was not something I was okay with, uh, waiting around for the next phone call, waiting for um, hearing somebody else that I served with, somebody else that I knew and cared about, that they decided that their best option was to take their own lives. And so,
Mm,
and I also started realizing that it was a pervasive issue amongst the veterans in our community, and uh, I wanted to help more than just the people that I knew. I wanted to help as many veterans as I could. And so I decided to start this podcast. To be perfectly honest, when I started it, I didn't have a clue what I was doing as far as how to start a podcast, but I didn't really care either. I knew that it was something that I needed to do.
mm,
And I wanted to uh, I wanted to start this to help out as many veterans as I could. And a lot of times people are sitting there suffering in silence. They don't realize that there's other people who may be going through the same thing as them. And by sharing these stories of other veterans and the resources that are available, I see you have that on the screen right now. There's so many resources for uh, uh, mental health, physical health, different uh, things, different support organizations that are out there. There's so many things that are there for people, and uh, oftentimes it's just a matter of education. If you don't know that these things
mm,
exist, then there's really nothing that you're going to do about them, right? So we have so
mm.
many resources available, and they're incredibly helpful. Um, and so sharing all these stories and resources, I feel like is my way of giving back to the veteran community and helping them as best as I can get over the issues that they're going through, and not necessarily
Fantastic.
getting over it, but
Mm,
helping them, guide them to the solutions, the things that are going to help them the best.
yeah, working through it.
Yeah. And then my book, Surviving Son, is basically my story of in much more detail, of kind of what we talked about earlier today. Surviving Son, it's about my time in Afghanistan, about the loss of my brother, and
Mm,
also about how that affected me, how it affected my family after we got home. Um, I hope that the veterans who uh, read a copy of my book, no matter where they're from, whether they're in the American Army or military, or any of the militaries around the world, I feel like they can learn something from this book. I feel like they can learn from my mistakes, get help sooner. Um, not feel like you're this big macho soldier who's gonna carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, when one more straw is going to break your back, that type of thing.
mm.
So you know find the help, find the resources that are out there that will help you. But also, I also hope that the civilians, the people who have never served in the military, will pick up a copy of this book and learn about the sacrifices that the military makes. Learn
Mm,
how these these people who you hear about in the news who were killed in action or wounded in action, how they're not just another face or another name on the news uh, with no story or background. You have no context to who this person was necessarily. It's just, oh, that's sad, and then the next thing comes on, and you've almost forgotten about this person. The way I've written this book is you almost start to get to know my brother, and know his personality, and from some people who've read the book and told me about this, it kind of stings when you get to the point where he passes away, because you feel like you kind of knew him, and you feel like uh, it's like, wow, this is a tragedy. This is a big
mm,
loss. Um, so I hope these people learn about these sacrifices and how it affects the families and the communities that we live in, so that and I say this not as an anti-war type person in any way, shape, or form, but I hope that they will learn these lessons, so that in the next conflict that the world is inevitably going to be thrown into at some point or another, whether it's in the near future or far down the line, so that we really stop and think: is this worth the cost that it's going to take? Is
right.
it worth these lives, these young men and women who are going over there to serve us? Is it worth their life to lose
Mm,
if we send them over there? And in some cases the answer is going to be yes, because there's some things that are just worth fighting for, but in other cases the answer is going to be no. And I just want to make sure that people really stop and think about what it is that we're sending people overseas for.
yeah. Well, Scott, to wrap up, I do want to again say thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your service, and that feels like it's not enough. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for sharing the process you're still going through, grappling with everything that's happened, so that you can be the best man you can be for those that matter the most to you, for your wife, for your family, for your son, for those people that you're around, and for the veterans that you honor and respect and care for as well, through your podcast and through the book. And really appreciate that. For everyone who's watching the recording on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Twitch, on anywhere where we have the recording, I'm going to go through and modify the notes and make sure that we have the link to the book and the link to the podcast in the show notes as well. Scott, is there a final thought that you'd like to leave with any veteran who's watching?
Yeah, for anyone who's watching, who is uh, going through a dark time, a rough time in their life, you have already survived 100% of the bad days in your life. You've done that. You should be proud of that. Like, it's not an easy thing to do, and you've done that. And the days will get brighter. The days will get better. If you let them, if you find the help and the resources that you need, and reach out to people and get the help that you need. There's no reason that you should be struggling and suffering in silence. There are a whole world of resources out there. Reach out and get the help that you need.
Wonderful. Well, Scott, thank you so much for giving us your time, sharing your story. Really appreciate you. And for those that are watching the recording, thanks for joining us on our Veteran Stories Difference Makers. And obviously, Scott is a real difference maker with what he's doing and what he's going to continue to do. So we look forward to seeing you again on another episode of Veteran Stories.